until recently, I think my idea of Australian identity was probably quite
Eurocentric?
Yeah, Eurocentric. Master narrative for sure. My understanding of acknowledgement to country was very, very poor until I've done some more research into exactly what that means.
So we consider land ownership to be, we buy the land now belongs to us, but we pay tax to the government because we bought the land off them, but their land is very different, their concept.
From nourishing terrains. I think it's a really good definition to help with our understanding, but it is quite poetic language, and that helped me with the spiritual side of understanding those values.
Yeah, and it was really like a gorgeous definition.
And that was something else that you were talking about, incorporating into drama, to place and to country through bringing the classroom outside. And
so you don't need to do everything inside a classroom with a fully, lit set and professional sound equipment. You can go outside and do performances. Backstage can be behind some trees, something like that.
In the Aboriginal culture that's been practiced on this land for
40
to 50,000.
40 to 60 or something.
Yeah.
Stories weren't written down, they were told, they were performed, they were danced. So Wakikiri, and so it's a story dance festival, so schools participate and they perform a story through dance. They're not allowed to speak. You're allowed to have music playing, but that's about it. They're really careful about promoting sustainability and looking at nature. So they go into like ways of reduce, reuse, recycle. They also talk about like giving back to the land and being very conscious of what you're doing.
Potential racism that we might encounter in the classroom from this master narrative, which is obviously the easier narrative that is encompassed within our society.
Yeah.
And dealing with how these concepts might engage the students or potentially not engage the students, I think is my greatest fear. You could have all this amazing content and the students just have no connection.
It might not be sort of overt racism. They might not, hate the Aboriginal people, but they just don't really care. They don't see what's relevant to them.
It is compulsory for us to be teaching this, even though there are probably huge gaps in our own education
because it's compulsory to teach now, but
it wasn't when we went through.
We were in school.
This book, you have a class full of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students or none at all. This is the greatest education challenge of our time.
Recent education reforms have really sort of set us up for some interesting futures.
Together, and we remember when the apology speech was given.
Memory, we're all out the front of the school, ready to raise the flag to half-mast, and our principal called on the Aboriginal students amongst us to come stand up at the front so that we could apologise to them. A bunch of 12-year-olds as we were.
Yeah.
And when not all of the Aboriginal students came up, she then produced a list to call them out and make them come up, which a lot of them didn't want to do. So that was a bit awkward. And then they failed in raising the flag correctly. And we all said sorry.
And I guess upon reflecting on this now, and with all the research that we've done over the last couple of weeks, we just sort of thought...
wasn't great. Could have been better.
Maybe at the time that's the best that they could have done.
It was
and
just
it
sort
was
of
better than nothing.
Yeah, it was just sort of thrust upon them, like this new education reform has been thrust upon us. They had probably less time to prepare, weren't entirely sure what to do and just gave it their best shot. And I guess we can only hope to do better by, educating ourselves.
And that's it. One of my other readings was just saying we have these reflections of our own education with it. And I think in this reading they use the example of the toilet roll didgeridoos and like the acrylic dot paintings with cotton wool buds. And that's been part of our encountering with it. I guess we have a better cultural sensitivity. So even if we're grappling at it with the silence is probably more damaging than nothing at all. So,
and you have to acknowledge when you've made a mistake to own up to it. So you don't just pretend that this, incredibly like insensitive or incorrect thing you've just done, you don't just brush over it. You have to correct that and make sure that the students understand that mistakes are okay, they happen in life. Might have been an unfortunate one that you just made, but you can do better.
The comparison of the acrylics and dot paintings versus that it usually was done in the sand and on bark, and it's a total other appropriation altogether.
They weren't meant to be permanent art pieces. They were meant to come and go as, nature said they would. The drawings in the sand were blown away by the wind. Things on the bark were, they crumbled, the rain got to them. And so these things had to be taught over and over again, the certain paintings, how to paint, a waterhole, how to paint a sacred site. This is the painting of, our journey across this stretch of land.
And Everybody's an Art Critic, which was getting different people from different parts of Australian culture and society and getting them to engage with an Aboriginal artwork. And the Indigenous people's interpretation was just so rich comparison to some of the other comments that were
They were immediately
made.
able to read it. Like it was, for me it was beautiful, but it was a collection of dots in various patterns and it was nice. Whereas some of those people, they recognise this is a representation of a sacred site, this part is a waterhole, these are fields, this is, men's business area, things like that. And they
versus
immediately
another
read
white
it.
response, which was, I don't like the colour brown. So it was a lot to unpack there, even just in having those different people interact with that work. I thought that was maybe a better way to go about looking at Aboriginal art than me just showing them stuff that they're immediately perhaps going to not be engaged with.
Important to talk about Aboriginal history and culture, because so much of that has been taken from the people, and for that to disappear would be a kind of cultural genocide.
Well, it has been.
Yeah.
It has been a cultural genocide for quite some time. And
silence is one way of continuing that. If we don't teach ourselves about it and teach future generations, then it will just go.
We need a greater understanding of the culture and its values and a sharing of that knowledge, because even before we were discussing the warning that gets given for Torres Strait Islander Aboriginal people if there are voices of the deceased or images of the deceased, and we were like, oh yeah, we kind of get that, but we're not
think
really
we can
sure.
guess why that
and
might
we should
be.
probably. We did find out from the research in that was that it was only for a period of time. In some specific cases that was a
and
thing.
It depends on group to group how long this is put into place. And there was something about how an Aboriginal person's name might be changed after death, so that you're able to speak of them without, speaking their name.
Teachers that she was educating about Aboriginal studies and their resistance and fear to engage with it. I think I was experiencing that about a year ago. The sense that I thought it was being sort of shoved into the arts curriculum in a way to justify the existence of the arts within the curriculum. I'll have a different view of that, and I can understand the importance of Aboriginal studies as a whole, and I think it should be in all units, not just the arts. But the arts is unique given the crossovers with their culture. And Arts and Australian Education Review, summarising the importance of cross-curricular priorities for the arts, and with all the cognitive development and all the other things, the social awareness,
can be expanded throughout any subjects. We were talking about, we did orienteering at school. We got a pre-made map with very precise calculations and a compass. Whereas that's not how it's always been done. It's something that needs to be included in all subjects, not just
all subjects
in the arts.
But maybe through the arts is my argument, that there could be more cross-curricular priorities through the arts, through looking at Indigenous awareness and Torres Strait Islander art and art forms in different text types.
Need to reflect the fact that Australia has an Indigenous history and Indigenous viewpoints on social, cultural and historical matters. It is essential that Indigenous viewpoints, interests, perceptions and expectations be reflected in curriculum teaching and learning in schools. That quote comes from the 1991 Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody report.
Importance of why this is such a huge thing for Australia in creating a new identity. Australia will never matter as a nation unless we learn about Australia as a whole and we have a foundation to build on. So I guess one of our greatest challenges is getting our students to recognise that the Indigenous art forms, there should be a connection there for them just as much as the colonial history.
Yeah, and that's something that can be quite easily done through drama. Australian drama is everything's all about identity, and it's mostly about the white Australian identity. But that's also a huge issue for the Aboriginal Australians. Even in terms of identity, there's two different people hold the title of the last Tasmanian Aboriginal person.
Yeah.
Truganini and Fanny Cochrane-Smith.
Schools can't solve racism, but they shouldn't contribute to it. So it's sort of combating these challenging views and having more of a discussion about them, because that's something else that the other read about, encountering racism in the classroom and how to combat that. Her initial reaction was to silence that racism and to not allow them to speak their views. However, over time she had sort of developed this other pedagogy whereby she had to sort of talk through those views and get them to question themselves through their own reflective
People don't
thought
learn
processes.
through you telling them to be quiet. That's no way to make a change. That just makes, that breeds hate, being silenced and everything. That makes them feel like they're the persecuted person because they're not even allowed to share their opinion. Particularly as a teacher, you can't just tell a kid to shut up because he's being racist. Like, you have
within reason. There's probably a point where you would say that's not okay, but especially at a high school level with some derogative terms perhaps. But interesting things to consider when put into the classroom. There was one SOS teacher that did it really well. We were doing a heap of colonial history, and there was this scene in the movie where they showed just an Aboriginal viewing the settlers. So there was a shortage of women, and then this new boat of women arrived, and there was massacres, rape massacres, and all girls' school watching this and just going, what the hell, this is disgusting. And it was probably the first time I'd really considered that our ancestors were disgusting. And the teacher was viewing the Aboriginal perspective and just going, imagine what they think of us as people.
No respect for the land, no respect for each other.
And what they're doing to their women. But that was the only time in all of my education where I actually thought, oh, there's a different perspective. It just didn't ever come up. There wasn't other teachers that were openly educating about it.
And as teachers, we have to sort of look to the school about what we can say. Do we talk about Australia Day or Invasion Day or Survival Day? Because using the wrong terminology could offend so many people.
Very important job that we have, and I don't take it very lightly, but I'm feeling more comfortable about it.
Yeah, it's something that we have to really try to do our absolute best, and if we fall short of that, we need to try again.